Brett King. That name needs no introduction, of course. You can't have tuned into this episode and not recognized his name. His first book, Bank 2.0, has completely reshaped the industry, and everything he has written since is equally fundamental to it. Synonymous with the change to digital that the industry needed to see 15 years ago, Brett's thoughts have been the cornerstone of change for leaders around the world. So FinTech owes him a great deal of that. Today, Brett is a futurist and looks at humanity through a holistic lens instead of one to do with finance only. And this conversation touches on everything to come, from AI to climate crisis and the avenues that humanity has ahead. Expect to hear things that will make you think and do further research, and to be ignited by his clear view of a future of genuine human potential. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Tales from the FinTech Crypt. I have the legend Brett King with us today. You heard the intro. There's no more intro than that to be done. There is probably no bigger name in FinTech, so thank you so much for coming over today, Brett.
It's always fun. Whenever we get together, we have great discussions. So it's makes sense that we should record this so other people can participate. But it's great to see you, Duena. Thank you.
Thank you for saying that. And yes, we have been friends for 15, 16 years now. And many of these conversations we wish you would have heard. And some of them we wish you never will. But yes.
True.
It's been a really long journey together. And I would say that the first time I've ever seen your name ever has been when I read your first book. So let me jump straight in. Why do we still have branches, Brett?
Well, we are now beyond the tipping point. So I got a new book coming out in March, Wiley. It's called Branch Today, Gone Tomorrow. And in this, as far as I'm aware, it's the first publication that is called Peak Branch, which happened in 2015. Right. And how we analyze that is we exhaustively went around and got all of the central bank data from all of the G20 countries and the Eurozone countries and put that together. That represents, in terms of branch real estate, the majority of branch real estate in the world. And the only economy where branches are sort of still stable or growing slightly is India. Everywhere else, China included, it's in contraction, right? And so that shift has already occurred, and the introduction of the smartphone banking was really responsible for that. But also where you see the growth in financial inclusion is coming, none of it is coming from branch-based banking. It's all coming from wallet plays, real-time payment rails, and things like that. So the trajectory of what a bank account is already moved well away from branches. So, the question now for banks that have them is, what are you going to do with them? And there's only one thing that is left that makes any sense, which is these have to be a center of digital excellence that help customers get more accessibility to digital. If branches aren't supporting the mission of the digital bank, then you don't have a bank.
Right. So they are gone. They are simply educational centers for moving to digital. I love it. Right. With branches out of the way and really retail banking out of the way, what are we left with in terms of the bigger disciplines that we were digging at back 15 years ago? Because I know there are some areas that are moving faster than others.
Well, in my last book on the banking space, Bank 4.0, I talked about the three core pieces of utility that a bank provides: the ability to safely store money, the ability to safely move money, and the ability to access credit. And if you look at most, this is certainly true of retail, a little bit different in commercial corporate banking, but that rule applies. And if you look at that, what is changing at the moment is the experience wrapper, or the technology that delivers that utility in real time. That's the shift. And as you do that, you get away from old product paradigms into more experiential elements. And so that's really where we see the differentiation emerging now, the buy now, pay later, behavioral savings approaches. When we start thinking about where that leads to, and the emergence of AI, which I'm sure we're going to talk about, this AI agency-based banking, where you have essentially a smart bank account that is your financial coach and helps you manage your finances and probably your health as well. Right. That's going to be something that's sort of embedded in your life, and you'll pull that utility from the bank as and when you need it.
Right. So this is how far away would you say where we have a direct assistance for both our finances and our other areas of interest, such as, your, like you say, your health, your
Sure.
well-being in general? When is this happening? Is this our lifetime?
Well, do you want the Elon Musk estimate or the proper estimate? So 5 to 10 years, but this is going to parallel artificial general intelligence, because if you think about it, where do you make money on AI? The agency model is going to be a massive generator of wealth, particularly for the technology platforms.
Right.
And this is a problem because of concentration of wealth in these areas, but still huge potential for these AI-based agents that sit with us in the cloud and on our devices, that we personalize. And so essentially we will train this personal agent over time in our interests, our likes, our dislikes, and that will be framed in the way that agent does commerce on our behalf. So time frame is somewhere between 5 to 10 years, with the emergence of what we would call artificial general intelligence and so forth as well.
I love that. That's really exciting. It's not very far away, and we're finally arriving. All these things we've made, all of the Finovate products anyone has seen over the last 15 years can very well now be wrapped in the correct AI companion, and that is something we've been dreaming and talking about for the last 15 years. So maybe there is a really big jump, because if we stop to look at it, the way you've explained it and the way you've very well taught the world it's happened, the evolution from product to experiences, and now hopefully to genuine companionship that helps one's life, has only taken us 15 years, but 15 very, very painful years. In the past, would you say that the hold up has been technological or more of a human debt and cultural nature?
Look, the fact is, even if we look at big problems like climate change, there are not technical limitations to fixing this. There are only policy and economic, constraints right now. If we were prepared to spend enough money, we could fix the climate change issue pretty quickly, certainly within a decade or two.
Right.
But we could have done that in the 80s and 90s. Why didn't we? Because we're making tons of money out of fossil fuel, and those sort of things. So I know that's a little bit off track, but in respect to sort of directionality, where we go from here, we have to figure out a better way to build consensus so that we can execute on the technological elements. And that's sort of the philosophical struggle that we have. And, we were talking about this before we started recording, about sort of economic philosophies and things like that are likely to change because of injecting AI and climate change into things.
Just my listeners are probably nowhere near understanding how that's going to go and how urgent it is. Can you just give us a really quick wrap up as to what that is?
I'll try to. It's a complex area, but for example, with the work that you've done in culture of organizations and getting the right balance between people and tech, as an example, this is an area which is going to become much more critical as we have large-scale technology unemployment potential from AI. So, and that ultimately leads to a very different view of work in the future. That's one element. But the other element is purely what we would call, in classic economic terms, Friedman economics, about productivity gains. Is that we have now this AI-based technology that we can employ at an industrial level to automate factories and transportation and shipping and stuff like that. We can, build robot factories. We can augment lawyers and doctors. So you have, from both a white collar and blue collar perspective across a broad swathe of industries, the ability to rapidly have sort of technology disruption occurring there, which in theory will lead to incredible growth, but also lead to high levels of tech non-employment. But it's the growth piece which is the problem. Because as we put more and more technology and automation into the system, and we get major increases in productivity, which is what the market is aiming for, the best way to get that level of productivity is eliminate humans from the process. And you then have the ability to infinitely scale up production over time. But we can't have infinite productivity or infinite growth on a finite planet. So at some point, we come to this point where our capabilities in terms of automating our economy and creating growth hit this limit of resource consumption where we will collapse the ecosystem. And this was first identified in a 1972 research piece called Limits to Growth Theory, which came out of MIT and the Club of Rome think tank back in 1972, and in 2020 was updated by KPMG. So 2038, 2040 is about when we get there, and that's also about when we expect China to become the world's largest economy and the US economy to face significant problems because of their national debt, which will be 200% of GDP at that point. So you've got, and the worst effects of climate and so forth are all sort of coming to coalesce. So end of next decade, we have to have a sort of real philosophical shift.
Crazy question, but if it is going that way, why haven't we just done away with the notion of existing national debt, money, and any of the lingering bits and pieces that we could have just sat down and agreed upon? Why hasn't the world stopped and went, right, blank slate, let's start again?
I think you have had elements of this. You've got World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab with the Great Reset. You have people talking about alternative approaches. Degrowth economics is a big theme in the economic field right now, which is moving to more sustainable mechanisms for the economy, focusing more on the needs of citizens initially from an economic output perspective, climate resilience, etc. So there is parts of this, but we don't have consensus. And we don't have consensus because of capitalism. Because capitalism teaches us that every market, every individual, every corporation is competing against someone else for resources. So at the heart of it, we really have to get off of this scarcity type competitive advantage to more of a philosophy of consensus building. And that's really only going to come through some sort of imminent systemic collapse where we get to that point where we understand, no, if we go any further with this, then we're talking about billions of people dead, and we have to change. It's sort of like a wartime effort in terms of that from a philosophical perspective.
It's not out of the question that we will at some point, hopefully as humanity, get our shit together, so to speak. So,
well, again, it's not a technical problem, right? We can solve homelessness very cheaply. We can solve food security, cheaply. We can deal with people not having work, through effective mechanisms. We did it during COVID.
Right.
So we have the technological tools, and we're going to get more with AI and quantum computing, our ability to solve really tricky problems, come up with new engineering approaches and things. That those doors are going to be open to us as well. So I don't believe it's a technical limitation of humans to survive. It's just one of whether or not we can get out of our own way in terms of traditional philosophies and culture.
And that this is when it gets a little bit pessimistic because we don't want to speculate on how capable humans are to do so. But I was going to ask you in terms of, we all know that what has happened AI-wise in our lifetime is fundamental, right? The fact that we have finally gotten this sorted is the biggest thing next to how we make energy that has happened in the last 20, 30 years. Now, what we're looking at today, obviously, is I suspect a moment in time of probably the next few years in which, as usual, when you come into something big, by the time we find our feet, it's for now a massive confusion, a grab for vaporware, and an explosion of various minor problems, whether existent or not, that are being solved on the periphery. Now, what is the next step where this kind of settles into one collective consciousness and people become accepting of the fact that we are now really two entities to think of in this game of life? And then secondly, where does it start making a difference in terms of amount of humans that are employed, amount of humans that are contributing things of value, and that shift towards value from humanity that is not what it was before.
Tied up in money. Yeah. Look, I think super AI is going to get us there. I mean, the problem with AI development right now is it's tied up in the market. It's hundreds of billions of dollars being invested in these data centers and so forth. But the reality is we are discovering new approaches to AI all the time, and to the ability where we see what AI is really, really good at doing is compressing human intelligence. So you've got much more efficient intelligence there, which theoretically, if we can apply that to reasoning, then you get much more efficient reasoning and logic processing capabilities out of AI, where we won't be able to argue with AIs in that space because they'll just make too much sense. And, but I don't think the AIs are necessarily going to take over, but I think this process of negotiated collaborative intelligence with AI is part of the philosophical shift. Because, for example, AIs will say at some point, why haven't you guys got rid of fossil fuels? It just doesn't make any sense. You're willing to kill 10 million people a year just to make dollars, that's insane. If you continue with that type of philosophy, you're going to go extinct. It's time to grow up. I can imagine that sort of conversation with AI happening and sort of forcing us to think about things. Where it gets interesting is on core human philosophies, on things like religion and so forth. Where is AI going to support that or be in conflict with that? And how might that change some pretty well-grounded institutions in human society? I don't know the answer to that because I don't know which way it's going to go. And then quantum, as we discover new things to learn about the universe and so forth. Humanity is going to go through this period of growing up very fast because of these technological changes. The fear or the risk is that some people will reject that, as we see with some more conservative approaches these days and so forth. And you could have sort of a split, where you have essentially two branches of humanity, those that are using technology and biology to augment intelligence and use that, and those who sort of want to stay more as natural humans because of their philosophical grounding or their environmental situation, right?
Right. Oh God, I didn't even think about that. I guess I'm too much of an optimist. I was convinced that at some point we're going to be doing the consensus thing. We're not going to be doing the split thing. But
we have to. Yeah,
right,
we have to. But
eventually,
there's going to be some people that don't want in. That don't want
we
AI.
see them every
in
day.
Their
I mean, we
life.
don't.
Yeah.
You see people who don't want progress every day. They're in the press every day, and if we're not going to even give examples, they're insanely clear.
Sure.
But in terms of what you were saying earlier, I love that idea where if you were to be going through a genuine moral audit of all your actions as humanity that are devoid of personal interests or in intrinsic existent relationships, then of course would be having a lot to answer for. But that does depend on how we format
look at healthcare
this now, right?
Sorry, I was just going to say, healthcare is a great example.
True.
It's like we have this amazing technology to do so much more for people, improving their health. But you look at places like the US. US doesn't have a healthcare system; it has a health profitability system. So what happens when the economy has the ability with AI to really provide mass healthcare at a very high quality level based on data, and based on real time information? Then suddenly you have amazing advances in longevity and curing diseases and so forth. But some people won't want their data shared, for example, and so they will be outside of this modernized healthcare system, and but that's going to have to be people's choice. But generally speaking, I think we will be building consensus because we'll have to, because of the macro changes that will be occurring.
I mean, this is happening already, and it's so exciting. There are so many things that have happened over the last 2 years only. You have those moments of absolute new types of discourse coming out of the scientific community in terms of, like you've mentioned, string theory alone has jumped over the last year to places where it sounded fantastic.
Like exoplanets. With James Webb, what it's shown us, and we're now asking questions. A lot of our our ideas of how the universe works have been challenged by James Webb, you know? And so this is what happens as we get more and more advanced technology, better sensors, better imagery, better computing. You know, we are having to question many of our sort of more primitive concepts of the universe.
Right. But as I was asking you before, does that not depend on what we do now? We are at this formatting stage of AI, I would say, where we start deciding in terms of the ethical conversation what should or shouldn't happen AI wise, right? So what limitations do we put in place? So unless we believe, and do you, that it's going to disregard all of that attempt of ours to put these guardrails in place, however right or wrong they are, and start developing a consciousness of its own, and in that case, kind of where is it going and where is it leaving us? But if not, will these guardrails create the future we're hoping for, or will it keep us from it?
Good question. You know, the biggest problem with guardrails for AI, particularly ethical guardrails, and you know this better than many, Duena, is that if you get 100 people in a room and try to create an ethical code of conduct as a group of humans, that you're going to have a large disparity in what we would consider ethical frameworks. Some people are going to want ethics built on Christianity or Islam. Others are going to be want it built on science. Others will want less centralization, and so more freedom of speech, and things like this. So getting consensus to create an ethical code of conduct for AI to operate in society is very difficult. So what AI is essentially learning, it's learning its ethics from the way we behave today. And that's not very good, right? Because, we create conflict as humans. We manufacture it even, certainly at the political level, for creating, tension and control elements in society. I don't think that's too controversial a thing to say these days. But at the same time, you would have to hope that, one of the core tenets of AI is, and Jeffrey Hinton talks about this, is that compressed intelligence capability. And part of that is compressed reasoning capability as well. So we are hopeful that AI will bring this order of logic to the approach of humanity. But part of that may be that you guys your systems are misaligned. They're not working effectively for humanity as a whole. And there's always going to be a group of people that actually don't want that outcome because they want advantages from the system skewed towards. That's why we have wealth and monarchies and the wealthy elite and so forth today. Is throughout human history, about 99% of human history have been these pyramid-shaped economies where the top 1% sort of controls the flow of wealth through the economy for their advantage. And you can see right now that system is really becoming more at threat because people are becoming more aware, and quantum's sort of going to blow that right open as well, with broad access to information by sort of, eliminating current encryption technologies and things. It's going to be an interesting time.
As soon as we enter collective consciousness, we might find things we don't really like, though. So I am both hopeful and fearful of what happens next. But
that's the negotiation process, right? That's where we have to grow up as a species.
As a species, yes, and it does look that way, doesn't it? Like we will eventually. Now, in between here and there, we're going to have, as you very well point out, the same forces that have stopped us from making banking apps faster, really. The same mentality that has kept us from genuinely innovating when we could before we had all of this access to faster innovation and the much bigger speed that AI is giving us. What we were having were these technology levers and these human levers, and we were trying to build with them. So the difference between today and then is massive. Going forward, it's going to move even faster. I think it's really important for anyone listening in that considers themselves just in the technology space or just in the fintech space to realize that there is no space that's only an industry space anymore. And kind of I
Yeah,
wanted your
true.
perspective on that, because yes, technology is the underlying layer to everything, but kind of thinking of ourselves as just in the financial industry is somewhat limiting, I think, to many people in the industry. Do you not find that that's the case?
Well, this is where actually, when you start thinking about how AI may work with us individually, if we want that high level of personalization, so essentially think about creating your own LLM based on your life, you're going to need to input all of your data, right? So your health data, your financial data, your behavioral data, what foods you like, what restaurants you like going to, where you like to, go on holiday or vacation, what movies you like to watch. All of this data is going to go into this personalized set of AI capabilities and be reflected in your interactions. This is how we sort of think about this. But again, that means then, well, where is your data stored? We probably need to concept something like a data wallet, or some sort of personal, as part of sort of our backup with our AI agent that would use that data for negotiation with other AI agents to get us the best deal or get us something that's really tailored to us. When you think about that sort of way, it seems very logical that that's how you would construct this. But that's not how we build things like financial services. Mm-hmm. It's not how we build things like healthcare. We tend to sort of try and, do a one-size-fits-all approach or reduce it down to segmentation. And we've heard talk about that market of one theory for a long time, but now AI really takes that to a different level. So, but this is also really the question about how AI integrates into our personal life. I don't know if that's really the answer to your question, but I do see like what we think of as a wallet today or a bank account, when you combine that with AI, it's no longer just about your money. It's now about your data, your health, and that's your sort of your vault of secrets, if you like. And then you have to decide which data you're willing to trade to get better experiences in life.
And how honest you're willing to be about and how self-aware you are, so that you can be honest. It's hard to be honest when you don't know much, but absolutely, I love that perspective. We went from kind of coloring green your tab or giving you a dog on your card to actually understanding that it is what you are willing to put into whatever container that will provide those, what I call money moments eventually, and hopefully extrapolate the banking layer into an underground process like we've been saying for the last 15 years. What do you think of the existing market in fintech is going to still exist in 20 years?
Yeah, this is a really key point. And it speaks to, from an infrastructure perspective, what's going to be required. So we know that if you start talking about AI-based agency, whether that's smart contracts for corporations or whether it's a personal AI agent, you're essentially talking about the building blocks of the machine-to-machine economy that will result in these smart economies, highly autonomous economies, and that will be the best way you can compete, and have the best growth. So we know directionally that's where we might go. But in terms of who are best suited as organizations to be a part of that world, then right now you have to look at it and say, well, who are the fastest growing financial institutions in the world? Who has the best technology and the best technology culture in an organization to absorb artificial intelligence into their stack? And the reality is that's mostly new entrants, whether that is wallet plays, whether that is real-time payments rail like Pix and in Brazil and UPI in India, whether that is players like Alibaba, and Alipay, Amazon, Apple, Google, etc., who have big data sets that can get access to now financial services, transaction data sets, and things like that. The reality is, if you then look at the top banks in the world in terms of asset size, and you say, how likely are they to make that transition into this AI-led world, that's a lot less certain than seeing if Nubank or Revolut or Klarna or Alipay or M-Pesa can make that leap, because their tech stacks alone is going to allow them to innovate around AI. Whereas you've got to fix the silo problem and the data lake problem and, all of those problems, at an incumbent. So in 20 years' time, when you have AI dominant infrastructure from a financial services perspective, most likely we're going to see the largest tech players in the world have more and more, strength in those areas, and the traditional banks, I think asset size actually could be inverse to your ability to evolve in this space. So, I think you have a lot more consolidation and specialization in the traditional sector. Some of them will join networks and platforms that have that automation, but ultimately, who's going to be the top bank in Latin America in 20 years? It's the top bank today, which is Nubank, right?
Right. I like that. That the experience layer is going to move elsewhere, possibly, which is what we've known all along. But at the end of the day, it does depend on what people have in terms of tech debt. And obviously, it's always depending on what people have in terms of human debt, what they don't even want to necessarily look at. But when it comes to whether or not we have banks, it's irrelevant. Or what institutions are going to give people their money moment is also irrelevant, as it very clearly changes a lot faster than we even thought. All of those decks we were showing people from stage about how impending the fintech revolution is in terms of it all happened in that sense.
Yeah.
But it also was completely frog-lipped by the latest developments, and it's anyone's game yet again. And I suspect that's going to keep happening. So I love that we can kind of look back and say, this is why the step took us so long, but the next steps are faster, and they do depend on how capable we are to stay human at the end of the day. And I want to bring you back to that. And I know that this is kind of not what we necessarily talk about this on this podcast, but we should. If we put aside all the things we've lived through, kind of the ironclad NDAs we have aside, but kind of all the long road in terms of meeting people who have tried to make change, looking at what change actually ended up being, our capability of building technology with loads of holes in it and covering up for ourselves, all of the things we've done over the years, the innovation theater, the business prevention department, all of those. How much of it won't even matter going forward, because we can delete it all and start with a new generation who's smart enough to understand, take it from experience backwards? And how much of it do you see happening? A question that I ask, and I don't know if you want to be forensic about it, but in general, feeling wise, do we have a new guard? Do we have a change of guard? We were talking about this 15, 20 years ago. Has it happened yet?
Well, I think, the fact is, if you look in the fintech space, these are the stats that most bankers would not be aware of. But today, if you look at the top 20 fintechs in the world, then they have about 4 billion customers, 200% growth over the last 5 years, 45% growth in revenue annually, CAGR, right? You look at the top 20 retail banks in the world, they have 2.7 billion customers. They have had 3% growth in terms of customer numbers the last 5 years, and 1/3 of the revenue growth that fintech has. So you extrapolate that, and it's fairly clear that the new kids on the block will be the big kids on the block. If not today, Revolut has 45 million customers, HSBC has 39 million. Nubank has 105 million customers. Their nearest competitor has 55 million across LATAM. WeBank in Shenzhen, 400 million customers, making them the third largest bank in China by customer numbers. So, and that's going to happen in health tech. It's going to happen in, in transportation. It's going to happen in all of these different areas. But at the same time, you've got this generational shift in thinking. Our kids are not married to capitalism. They're not, they don't see socialism as the dirty word that, conservative politicians have tried to make it into, because they're like, no, we want to be more consensus based. We want to build community. We want to, and then that leads to a sort of a different philosophy of life, which is, my work needs to be meaningful. If I'm building a company, it needs to be meaningful and it needs to be sustainable. And so then you have a sort of, I would imagine in the mid-2030s, you would have a pushback against corporations that are just profit-making machines. If you don't have a broader social consensus-based goal, if you're not advantaging society, if you're not helping us make this transition, then you're going to be vilified, and your legal means will be used to minimize your influence on the system. Because ultimately, I think humans are smart enough to know that when there's a binary choice, if it's extinction or continuing with capitalism, that we're going to have to modify the system. And I don't think our kids are going to be concerned about that at all. I think they're going to be excited about bringing their new philosophies to the world.
So it hasn't yet happened, but we're getting there. We haven't had yet
I think the seeds have been planted.
Right.
Yeah.
I love this about the new generation. They come in with so much change intrinsically in their hearts and so much courage to talk about it that we didn't have in their time, that it will absolutely make a difference. And the fear I have is that the work structures we're throwing them into are completely incapable of consuming that, and unfortunately they will self-select themselves out of having this talent at all when you chain them to a desk inexplicably.
Yeah.
So all of that is going to be interesting over the next few years, but maybe we're talking about a slightly larger time frame than we would have liked. But it's still going great, isn't it? We're having the world today as compared to the world 15 years ago is vastly different, and it's going the right direction, hopefully, if we can save it in time.
Absolutely. In fact, all the data, well, not all of the data, but most of the data. If you look at pretty much every G20 economy apart from the United States, we have seen continuous improvement in life expectancy. We've seen continuous improvement in literacy rates. Access to housing is a problem that's emerging globally right now because of the cost of housing. But think about what comes out of the other side of this. If in 20 years' time, if I ask you, hey, Duena, what do you do? Your answer is most likely going to be something that you're passionate about, that adds value to society in a unique way. What it isn't going to be is, this is the job I do to put food on the table or a roof over my head, because we'll solve those problems with technology. So everybody will have access to a very high quality, standard of living, right, because of the technical capabilities.
I love that. That is really hopeful for anyone listening to this. And if there's any advice you'd give the new entrants into the technology and financial technology market, since this is the topic of our particular conversation, what would you say they should focus on? Where is their most growth to be had? I know my answer is forget the tech part and focus on the bits we don't have, which are the human bits. But what would you say that they should razor sharp start investing time and thought into?
Like big, hairy, audacious goals about fixing meaningful problems on the planet, wealth distribution, affordability of housing, these are some major issues that we have to deal with as part of this transition. They are areas that are intimately tied into how you would use money and how you earn living and so forth. And I think, obviously there's the application of AI that's going to help people just be healthier, whether that's financial health or physical health. I think I think longevity is going to change again massively the way we think about wealth, and the way we think about work. Because if you think about, if you can live to 130, well, now you have to work until you're 90, be able to afford to live until you're 130. Can you imagine us living the retirement age to 90?
I'm trying not to.
No, but this is the thing, is when you start thinking about this, it really shows you that longevity is not particularly compatible with the way we think about wealth creation and, assets today. So, if we're going to live longer, which is technically going to be feasible within the next 10 to 15 years, then we need a different system of values. So that's just one area. That's even before we start talking about climate change response and the massive climate mitigation bill we're going to have. As we're recording this, we've just seen the floods, and hurricane damage in North Carolina and elsewhere in the US. That's just going to be repeated and repeated and repeated. Trillions of dollars of extreme weather damage. How do we make our communities resilient in the face of that type of extreme weather events? Unemployment from AI. All of these things are big things that just require us to have a fundamentally different approach of how we approach life, and that's coming.
That's really hopeful. Maybe we should leave it there before we become any lower in our hopes going forward. But thank you so much for really framing it for us, because at the end of the day, what has come before, and we have many war stories, we should do another episode that's only about gossip in fintech back in the day. It's not that important. Where we're going forward is what matters, and all of that requires us to be a lot more human than we've ever been able to be before. And I'm sure we're getting there. The more we say this to people, the more they'll understand it's an emergency to turn to these topics, and hopefully, things are going to move slightly faster. So thank you so much for saying it that way again, Brad. And I hope everyone buys your next book out soon, obviously, and no one should have
March.
tuned in without having bought the other ones. And we'll pick this up again, hopefully sometime soon. Thank you.
For sure. Thank you very much.
Bye.